Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today, with Battle for Azeroth getting closer and closer to launch, and Battle for Azeroth Beta sort of coming to an end pretty soon, I really wanted to start touching on the specs that I'm going to be interested in using for leveling, and just the legendaries I'm going to be using with them, with the gear and enchants and things as well. Now, the first one I want to look at here, and it's one of the two that I'm really interested in leveling, a third not being so much, is Affliction. Now, Affliction, is an interesting spec. There's a few things that are going to be carrying over from Legion that are present, or I guess a lot of things I should say, that are present in Legion into Battle for Azeroth. There's also a few changes that have been brought along with the spec. Summon Dark Lair is one of our new abilities. It's basically our Soul Harvest-esque kind of cooldown here. It deals more so increased damage for each dot you have active on your target, and it's more of a pet cooldown than like a personal cooldown, but it's something, honestly, I prefer a bit more than actually having a personal cooldown. I think it's pretty cool, it's pretty awesome, and it rewards tight, good play. Looking at the actual build I want to be running here, there's a few talents that I believe are going to be, I guess, so mandatory, at least for the build that I'm going to be running. I think they're going to be the most powerful, hands down, and they're ones you're going to be want to be taking for leveling. In the first row, it's sort of your personal preference, personal choice. If I had, if somebody asked me which would you take, I would say Drain Soul. Nightfall's close as well, but Drain Soul is going to be best for sniping shards off of mobs, just like it's going to be in dungeons and things of the sort. Second row, what I would say is an absolute choice you have to make is Absolute Corruption. Absolute Corruption is going to be probably the most impactful talent you have for leveling in Battle for Azeroth. That, in conjunction with Sacrilash's Dark Spite, her Strike, our Ring, is going to be absurdly powerful. The third row, the level 45, is really up to you. I'm just going to take Burning Rush because it's a speed increase, and I can heal through a million different ways as Affliction. Even though the Drain Life was removed from Drain Soul, we still have Drain Life back, so that's fine. Level 60 row, and this is the other talent I would say is probably mandatory, the 2 out of the 3, and that is Sow the Seeds. It's a great way to spread corruption across multiple mobs that you're tagging and running around from, pulling with higher gear levels you're able to do. And honestly, it's a spell you're going to use even when you already have corruption applied, just to quickly AoE down the pack you pull. At level 75, the choice is Dark Fury or Mortal Coil, I believe here. Both proc Sefu's Secret. Both are fine. Mortal Coil will heal you. Dark Fury is more of a AoE crap, I made a mistake kind of thing. Or also to proc Sefu, it's up to you. Realistically, I'm probably going to take Dark Fury here, but it's sort of a toss-up. It's up to you. On the level 90 row, it is sort of a toss-up as well. I don't really think Grimoire Sacrifice is worth taking, I'm going to be honest. Whether I'm playing Destruction or Affliction, I've typically just used my Voidwalker for leveling, just as a way to keep extra mobs and extra heat off of me. I've just felt a lot of the time like you might lose a little bit of damage, but you gain so much more survivability with it. And just having your pet over there dealing with them, while you're just able to havoc these two mobs down, or to able to dot them up and burn them down super quickly with all the dots you have rolling through Affliction, your UAs and everything. It's just much more powerful than having your pet sacrifice for a random damage proc. One thing I did want to mention, however, though, is that you do retain, unlike in Legion, when you're looking at, it's more so like Warlock Draenor in the past. When you sacrifice your pet, depending on which pet you sacrifice, you do gain the Command Demon buff, which is pretty awesome, which is not something we've seen in Legion. So that's pretty cool. Like if you sacrifice a Fell Hunter, you gain the Interrupt and Silence ability that it actually has, which is great. It's great to see that returning ability. Haunt is okay, but it's more of a single target ability. Shadow's Embrace is what I'm going to choose here. It's going to get even just a little bit of use out of it, compared to Haunt and Grimoire Sacrifice. Probably not a whole lot, but it's going to help. The third talent that I would say is mostly mandatory, at least in my opinion, but you can take the other two, is Creeping Death. Creeping Death, it's just going to make your dot tick faster, obviously. You're having your agonies ticking faster, even though you obviously don't have Siphon Life here because of the talent in your Absolute Corruption row. Making your agonies tick faster is just going to help kill the mobs quicker. It's going to faster leveling. The interesting interaction you see here with Creeping Death and Absolute Corruption, you might be asking, well, Corruption's permanent. Well, how is it dealing damage 15% faster? Or what's the interaction there? The interaction is basically, and they worded it better, I can see here now as well, it just makes Corruption as permanent tick 15% faster, which is great. If you stack that with your Sacrilash's Dark Strike, it ticks 15% faster, it's permanent with Absolute Corruption, and it's also dealing 15% more damage while also slowing the mobs. So as you can see here, this build is really focused a lot on Corruption and just slowing the mobs and building up just massive Corruption damage, which is a great way to level. Like I said, honestly, a lot of it's really just going to come down to just tab targeting, dotting. As you can see how I'll run in here and just dot 3 or 4 or 5 of these mobs up. With Agony, my pet's going to pull a decent bit of them. I'll just throw a Seed of Corruption in there. I'll have him come over here and attack this. just throw a seed in there, you know, pop the seed, and honestly, you can just walk away at this point. Your pet's beating on them, but if they were chasing you, my pet's gonna die actually. But as you can see, even they're chasing me, they're just slowed by Dark Strike, and they're just slowly dying with corruption on them. Like I said, you know, if your pet is alive and actually healing him and stuff, they'll die even quicker than that. But honestly, it's just so powerful having permanent corruption with the slow, with it ticking faster, and with it dealing more damage. It's really gonna make leveling just so simple and fast. I will say that I believe, you know, you can pull larger when it comes to actually playing Affliction versus Destruction, although I feel that Destruction probably leads to the fastest kill times between mobs, so let's get right on into that. Now the second build I'm also interested in leveling with is Destruction, I guess the second spec I should say, which I guess the cat's out of the bag. It's a Demonology. It's not a spec I'm super interested in leveling with. I actually really like Demonology. I like to say that it's in on beta. I do think that its numbers could be increased a little bit. But regardless of that, just Demonology in the past, and even a little bit now, has suffered a bit from, you know, multi-target and swapping targets quickly. With the changes to Implosion and having Power Siphon and things of the sort in BFA, that has changed and it has improved, as well as having Soul Strike and certain talents like that. But, you know, playing Destruction as well, which is very similar, you know, to Affliction in terms of its early level damage, it's just absurdly powerful. The build I'm looking at running, and probably going to be running, is a build with flashover, reverse entropy. This is sort of a row you can choose whatever. I'll probably end up taking Burning Rush here, or just doing something with Demon Skin a little bit earlier. Once again, the 60 row is also a row. It's probably personal preference. I feel that Fire and Brimstone is probably a little better for leveling because, you know, you're not going to be... While Havoc is going to be a really good tool for leveling and killing 2 mobs just almost instantly, being especially geared heading into this, it's going to be really strong and really powerful. But there are going to be times where you pull 3, 4, 5 mobs, and Fire and Brimstone is going to generate an insane amount of shards really quickly with Incinerate spam for your next mob, or for your next, you know, mobs that you pull. You could make the argument that Cataclysm would do the same in a sense and kill them quicker, and to be fair, that's completely accurate. This is really just a personal preference row. I would stay away from Inferno, I will admit, even though I do think that the Rain of Fire ring could be a little powerful and stuff. I just feel that, you know, being so geared, or I guess I'm 980, I'd probably say being around 950 or higher, you're going to be just crushing these mobs so quickly that Inferno and Rain of Fire is not really going to be worth it early on. 75 row again, Dark Fury and Mortal Coil can proc Cephus. It's personal preference, up to you. I take Dark Fury for an AoE stun in case, you know, stuff actually ends up going pretty badly. I can just, you know, stun and get a little bit distance between them. Now this row here, I believe actually Roaring Blaze probably is the correct choice here. When you say you pull 2 mobs, you put up a Havoc, you can Flagorate, which hits both, and then cast a Chaos Bolt and maybe an Incinerator so if they're not dead. The Roaring Blaze typically ticks, you know, a few times, once or twice over the duration they're alive, even though it's not a full 6 seconds. The main thing here is that Supremacy is just not that great of a talent for leveling. Honestly, a great of talent in general, I don't feel right now. But with leveling, you know, obviously not being based around just massive cooldowns once every 3 minutes, obviously it's nice when it comes to, you know, rare mobs and larger, higher health mobs, but it's just not going to have a whole lot of impact when it comes to leveling across, you know, each pack that you see. And Grimoire Sacrifice obviously is back, and one of the positive things that they changed about Grimoire Sacrifice, and they're reverting it to the way it was in WoD and before, is that it actually does grant you your Command Demon ability. Like if I sacrifice my Voidwalker here, I would retain, I believe, his Shadow Bulwark ability. It's the same way I know with the Fell Hunter, you know, he has his Interrupt, and if you're playing in Legion right now, you have to keep him out for his Interrupt, and if he dies, or, you know, he's gone for some reason, or you sacrifice him, or whatever, what have you, you lose the Interrupt. Now, which is a great change once again, they reverted it back to the WoD state. You keep the Interrupt, and you keep the Command Demon ability, which is nice. I think it's a flavor win. It's pretty awesome. The final row here, honestly, I just prefer Channel Demon Fire for its overall versatility. I don't really think you're going to have a whole lot of issues generating resources, especially with the Legendaries I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, what I'm going to be wearing. And just Dark Soul is a powerful ability. It's a powerful cooldown, but once again, it's not a 2-minute cooldown. It's not going to affect you from between each and every pack, and Channel Demon Fire will. Channel Demon Fire is good on single target, it's good on multi-target, it's just good all around. So the staple spells I would recommend, I'm going to be taking, is definitely Flashover, Reverse Entropy, Flashover. You could probably make a case for Shadowburn. I did actually level initially with Shadowburn before these talents got tuned a bit more. I didn't mind it. You can probably make a case for it, but I'm going to definitely say you would want Shadowburn, or I'm sorry, you definitely want Flashover, and then you can either choose Reverse Entropy or Shadowburn, and you definitely want Channel Demon Fire. So Channel Demon Fire and Flashover are probably the 2 that I'm really focused on. As far as Demonology level or Destruction leveling, you'll see right here, at early levels, especially with character copy and things of the sort, you really just, crush and decimate mobs. They don't last very long. You apply Havoc to one, you conflagrate one, Chaos Bolt, and they're both dead. Well, this one's almost dead because they recently nerfed Havoc to dealing 75% damage to your second unit target versus 100, which is fine. But regardless, you saw the first mob there to get absolutely decimated, and that's honestly the trend across the vast majority of Destruction's early levels, with Havoc use or without. You really just overgear a lot of the stuff. I'm 980, even like I said, even at 960 when I was leveling beforehand. You really just outgear a lot of the content, and you're one-shotting or two-shotting both these mobs, all the mobs. As you can see here, you can just throw in Channel Demon Fire at the very end for a little bit of cleanup, which is why it's so good there as well. It hits both targets, and that's basically it. I mean, this, you can see as well that it killed the mobs actually faster than Affliction did. The one negative is that you can't necessarily pull as many mobs as quickly as Affliction can, but regardless, they all end up dying pretty quickly all the same. And the last spec that I want to talk about, but definitely not least in my opinion, even though it's probably the spec that I'm not going to be leveling with, is Demonology. Demonology is basically the spec that has gotten the overhaul for the expansion, and even though it's very different from the way it is in Legion, it's also very similar in a lot of ways. If you tried to level as Demonology in Legion, you probably realize pretty quickly that it doesn't level nearly as quickly as Affliction or Destruction does. Your Felguard has a little bit issues holding threat from time to time, but the main issue that stems from Demonology is the pet AI and them switching to targets quickly enough, and just their energy and their duration, and they expire randomly from time to time, and just shard generation and resource generation in general. But if you did want to level as Demonology, I think that's perfectly okay. Like I said, I will state again that Affliction and Destruction are both going to be faster. I'm not really sure which one I've decided on yet to level personally myself between Affliction and Destruction. But if you have your heart set on leveling as Demonology and you really love the spec, that's totally fine. That's totally awesome. The talent build I'm looking at here is, there's a decent bit of play with Demonology talents. There's not really a whole lot that I would say are set in stone. Maybe one of the two talents here. Let me kill this mob quickly. Sorry about that. You can even see here, Demonology does have a lot of movement with the spec, but you can see even just on one target here, it takes a decent bit more, a decent bit longer to actually kill it versus Affliction or Destruction. With Destruction, that would have been dead in 3 seconds, but it took 7 or 8 there. I guess you saw me use Soul Strike there a little bit as well, but the talents that you get here, they're pretty customizable. I do really prefer Dreadlash, especially for pulling multiple targets at once. And it does add a little bit of AoE to your actual rotation, as well as being able to use Implosion. However, that does set you back pretty far in resources. It's because of the talent that I'm probably running in the first row. Bioscourge Bombers really needs to be buffed a little bit to actually be worthwhile. I think it's an awesome ability, but I just don't think it's worthwhile at this point. The second row, you have a choice between Demonic Calling and Power Siphon. At this point, I'm a bit more of a fan of Power Siphon, both for, I would say, a little bit more flexibility with movement and things of the sort. Even the Demonic Calling does grant you a little bit more flexibility with movement as well. I'll touch on that a little bit more when it comes to Legendaries and a little bit here as well, what you can take with Demonic Calling. But my choice has been Power Siphon. I've liked it. I liked it more in raids especially, and I think that'll be the go-to talent in raids the vast majority of the time. So I'm going to stick with Power Siphon there. Once again, this is your personal preference. Burning Rush, Demon Skin, Dark Pact. Here, I believe, first of all, I think Summon Valfiend is horrendously undertuned, so I wouldn't take that. From the Shadow is a nice talent, but honestly, it's more of a single target based talent over things in dungeons, where you can pair it with Sacrifice Souls. Here, I prefer Soul Strike. The Shard Generation is nice for leveling. More resources when you're leveling is great, as well as being able to use it on the move, and it only have a 10-second cooldown. It's awesome. It hits pretty hard as well, which is nice because early on, like you saw a second ago, Demonology doesn't kill as quickly as Destruction or Affliction does. So having an ability that you can start using when the mob's at 30 or so % health on the move to head to your next pack to save a little bit of time is nice as well. This row, once again, just to proc Cephus if you're using it or things of the sort. Personal preference, I'll probably end up using Dark Fury, but I don't know why I have Mortal Coil selected here right now. The one row that I would say is, at least to me, is almost like a mandatory choice is the level 90 row, and that's Inner Demons. Inner Demons, I think, is an awesome talent. It's a passive that summons a few imps around you, has a chance to summon a random demon from a Twisting Nether. It pulls random demons. It's pretty cool. Sometimes it pulls Eyes of Gul'dan, sometimes it pulls Prince Malchazir from Karazhan. It's pretty awesome. You don't see it happen very often, but regardless, what you really want is the passive pets around you. It's really going to provide a whole lot more damage when you're traveling from pack to pack or from mob to mob, and it helps you recover a little bit more when you use Implosion as well. Because while Implosion was nerfed recently, even in dungeons, if you're using Implosion towards the end of a pack, you throw all your imps in the pack, and you have 2 or 3 shards hanging in the next pack, but you're just sort of behind on path, you're trying to catch up while everybody else can start bursting again. Inner Demons provides a little bit of that extra cushion. Like, okay, you have a little more resources heading into the next pack, and the same is true for leveling, heading to the next mob or so. The last row, Nether Portal is just a 3-minute cooldown. It's really not going to do much for you. It's an awesome talent. I think it's too expensive. I think it shouldn't be a 2-second cast, and I think it's too long of a cooldown. With that being said, though, it's really not very useful because of the 3-minute cooldown, and it's probably going to see only a good bit of use, if you're killing rare mobs or higher health quest mobs or things of the sort. But honestly, if that's the case, you probably see better off with Demonic Consumption or Sacrifice Souls, anyways. I haven't tested a whole lot with Demonic Consumption. The one thing that's interesting, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a few minutes here with Legendaries, is that if you do pair this with your Wilfred's Sigil, I think this could lead to some insane damage, because Wilfred's Sigil of Superior Summoning is going to be reducing the cooldown every Demonic Tyrant, which, like I said, I'll touch on here in a few minutes. I'm probably going to run, I've been running right now, I would say, at least with Sacrifice Souls. It is a passive buff it puts on you, and it does last, outside of combat, once you drop combat for a few seconds until you head to the next mob, or next pack, which is nice. I think they'll both be, relatively useful for leveling. I think Sacrifice Souls provides a little bit more of a passive, just speed increase from pack to pack. But Demonic Consumption is pretty awesome as well. And if you're leveling as Demonology, I think you're more so leveling just because you like how awesome the spec is and the flavor of it. So that if that's the case, I definitely would say that Demonic Consumption is a talent you would be interested in taking. Once again, as far as leveling with Demonology goes, you'll see here, like I said a little bit ago, it's a decent bit slower than leveling as Destruction or Affliction. I mean, you can pull 2 mobs at once, but the vast majority of your damage is tied up in a single target. You do have a bit of damage with, let me send him with the Soul Strike there. See, he does charge, which is awesome. It does provide a lot of movement as well. You do get some movement with instant cast Demon Bolts and other things of the sort, but a lot of your damage is tied up in a single target. And as you can see here, like with Destruction, we wouldn't be able to just have these 2 mobs, and we would be moving on these back 2 already, probably 5-6 seconds ago. And like you see here, once again, our implosion damage has been nerfed a decent bit. Actually, throwing those imps there only did about 30% or so health to each one of those mobs, which is unfortunate. That was with our Demonic Tyrant active as well. With that being said, I still think the spec is awesome. Like, it's awesome to play. I think the fluidity of the spec is great. Just for leveling, I think it's going to be a little bit slower than what you actually want. But regardless, if it's something that you really just enjoy and want to just more so enjoy leveling, I'd say Demonology is probably just the way to go. You're really going to get a lot out of the class and be able to experience just the way that Demonology has been redesigned. I think Blizzard's done a great job with that. Now, as far as Legendaries go for BFA leveling, I've basically got a set of Legendaries I have basically thought of already for every single spec. As we can see here, first of all, is taking a look at Affliction. You're going to see what I'm going to be running basically Sacrilege, Dark Strike, and Sefu's Secret. I mean, you're going to see a little bit of a trend here, is that Sefu's Secret is honestly going to be running across basically every spec. If you look at it here, obviously the 10% passive movement speed and 2% haste grants is really powerful. It's a it's a base 2% haste and 10% increased movement speed, regardless if you're 110 or 115, which really makes it powerful because all your other gear is scaling down once you hit every level, but not Sefu's. Obviously, if you're able to use the proc on it, which is proccable by Fear, Shadow Fear, things of the sort, 70% movement increase, speed effect, and 25% haste for 10 seconds is really powerful. Looking at Sacrilege, Dark Spite, it's obviously going to be really powerful to have the, with Absolute Corruption, having the permanent corruption, having it deal 50% increased damage, and also the main effect we're looking here is actually to be slowing every mob that's attacking you, or I guess it's chasing you at this point. Being able to tab target through all the mobs, Agony Corruption, or just agonying a bunch of them and then, AoEing them down with Sow the Seeds, and just having them, follow you around and not really hit you very much. It's going to be really powerful. That's going to be, like I said before, the main way you're actually leveling with Affliction, probably until higher levels. Even honestly, at that point, it's probably still going to be a thing. I guess I can touch on it here, and I'll head into other specs as well. Is that the other option here we have for Affliction, realistically, is probably Hood of Eternal Disdain. It's especially powerful with Creeping Death as well, because it reduces Agony's duration as well as Creeping Death. But the one thing here, unfortunately, is that it shares a slot with your Azerite armor. Azerite armor comes in a helm, chest, and shoulder pieces. And unfortunately, well, I guess I wouldn't say unfortunately, but basically as soon as you get your Azerite neck, you're actually given an Azerite armor piece here, which I believe is around 265, and you can see this one's 275. I think one of these two is where I got from a quest, the other one's from a dungeon. But regardless, if you look, the Legendaries are actually 265 item level, and the armor you're given either 275 or 265, which is, obviously on the same item level as Legendary. So with them having, the actual like traits within them, it makes them really powerful, and probably not something you really want to be using over Legendary. I think there might be one or two cases with other specs that you could probably make that argument for, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Another thing that I also wanted to mention here is that normally I would say Pride Eyes would be really powerful for leveling. Having a 25% shield every 30 seconds would be really powerful, as well as having all the stats, having a gem slot, and having an enchant on it as well. But you're getting a Heart of Azeroth basically the second you hit, start into battle for Azeroth. And the item level on it at level 2 here, as you can see, is 282, which I believe it starts at 280. And the stats it grants you are already, honestly almost double what Pride Eyes grants you. It's 77 versus 133 of each stat. And obviously, it's used through your Azeroth armor pieces and things of the sort. I don't know if you have to actually have it equipped to, have those bonuses active in your Azeroth armor. I don't believe that's the case. But regardless, it's going to scale up so quickly with leveling and the Azeroth power that you gather through rares and questing and dungeons and things of the sort. Pride Eyes is just not worth it, even with the passive shield. Moving on to destruction, you're going to see, like I said, a familiarity here. We're using Sephiroth's Secret again. Just the passive movement speed and haste is just going to be so powerful, even for destruction. Just having that 10% movement speed for the first, I guess you could say probably 5s, I guess because they all go inactive at 115, but basically it's right at the end of 115. So the first 6 levels is really going to be just so powerful. Obviously, if you're able to proc it, between every few mobs, every few large pulls you make, it's going to be extremely powerful for leveling with that speed bonus on it. As far as destruction goes, you don't really have a whole lot of other options for legendaries you can wear. I mean, you could wear Sindori Spite, but unfortunately it's on a cooldown. And, it's not really something that's going to benefit you a whole lot heading from each, just small pack to small pack. It's more like a big cooldown for like a rare or a mini boss, something of the sort. You could wear Class Ring, obviously, which would grant you Eradication, but Eradication with leveling, once again, is sort of just okay, because honestly at early levels, even in the mid levels, 113 115 or so, you're 1 or 2 shotting these mobs with Havoc, even with Havoc or without Havoc, and it's really probably not even going to play much of a role even when you get to higher levels. It's just not really a great choice. Once again, Pride Eyes fights with Azeroth armor pieces, and one thing I want to make note of here is that obviously lessons to space-time fights with Azeroth armor pieces as well. But there's one thing here that's different from live servers. If you take a look at it here, obviously it has the same tooltip. It says while you have your dimensional rifts open, all your damage is increased by 10%. The other equip that we see here, though, it says it increases all your damage done by 3%. And this is not a thing that's on live servers. And I don't think this has been reported yet, but I believe this is actually Blizzard trying to compensate for certain legendaries basically losing their abilities. Obviously, we don't have Dimensional Rift, unfortunately, heading into BFA. I really thought and hoped that would actually become a talent, but unfortunately, it's just not the case. Having a 3% passive damage increase is nice, but once again, you're slicing through mobs at 110, even if you're probably around 950 item level on live, and I'm 980. You're just going to be flying through them as destruction. And the 3% damage bonus you're really not going to notice. Plus, fighting with an Azeroth armor piece, and the Azeroth armor is going to get higher in item level as you go, when you gain more powerful ones. It's really just, unfortunately, just not worth it. So, and taking a look at actual Demonology Legendaries here, once again, you see Sephiroth's Secret. This is like probably the spec that Sephiroth's, I would say, is probably the best for, like stat-wise, just sort of ignoring the passive movement speed. Obviously, once again, the movement speed is great, and the 2% haste is awesome for Demonology. And one thing, like I said, you got to keep in mind here as well, is that this is a passive 10% haste, passive 10% movement speed and 2% haste, regardless of whatever level you are. All your other gear, stat-wise, you see I'm sitting at, 35% haste, 24% crit. I'm in Demonology spec, basically wearing my gear right now. Once you start leveling, you're really going to be losing that haste percentage. It's going to drop and drop and drop. But this is a passive 2% haste, and it doesn't go away, obviously, until it basically is, turned off at 116. So that's huge. Obviously, it can be proc through Shadow Fury and things of the sort. The other thing here is Wilfred's Sigil, and this has been reported recently, I believe in the last beta build, but it hasn't been changed here, at least the tooltip hasn't. I haven't tested if it works this way, and it just hasn't been changed tooltip-wise, but I know for a fact that it was data mined and reported that each time you cast Call Dreadstalkers or summon some Wild Imps, instead of reducing, like it says here, your Summon Doomguard and Summon Infernal cooldowns by 2 seconds, it's going to reduce your Demonic Tyrant cooldown by 2 seconds. And this is a big change. Demonic Tyrant, it's a big cooldown, and you might not be using it every pack, but it's going to be really powerful, especially for soloing some larger packs or mini bosses or things of the sort. It's going to be a really powerful cooldown to have, even just for leveling. Now, once again, I would say Demonology is probably going to be the slowest of all 3 leveling specs, but If you have your heart set on leveling as Demonology, or really just want to play this spec as leveling and learn it and get a good feel for it, this is probably probably the legendary that you're going to really want to go for. You do have like two other options here. I mean, I don't really believe Waker's Loyalty is an option, but I did want to show that it once again does have the passive 3% damage added onto it due to the fact that Thou Chaos Consumption is unfortunately no longer a thing, even though he's still following me around and talking to me, and I put the helm on, it actually still does build up stacks on beta, but and now Recurrent Ritual, obviously I think it's even better when you're using Demonic Calling, but I really believe this is probably the one of the very few legendaries you can make a serious case for wearing over Azeroth armor when leveling, just because it helps so much with the speed and just honestly I would probably say the fluidity of the spec and just your shard generation. You know, Demonology suffers a lot from, you know, transitioning from one mob to another, as you saw even before. You know, when you're playing Destruction, you can just havoc these two mobs and they both get blown apart. As Affliction, you can dot run, just throw a few Seed of Corruptions in and they're all dead. Unfortunately, with Demonology, with the Implosion nerf we had recently, just a single target, just the way it's built, the spec is built and what it's mainly meant to do, it has a bit more trouble transitioning from mob to mob with the pet UI and the swapping and recasting their firebolts, and if things die before they cast again. It's not, you know, it's not as fluid as you would like, but you know, obviously having one soul shard refunded to you, and if Demonic Calling procs, it's basically free. That's awesome. This is going to be a really powerful legendary, and it's probably one of the only ones I could say I can actually make a case for heading into BFA to wear over your Azeroth armor until 116 goes inactive. One thing I did want to mention here as well, and it's not actually here in my bag, so I'll pop it up on the screen right here, is that Solumbra, the crafted cloth legendary, the shoulders that you can actually buy off the auction house, they grant the passive healing effect, I believe every 1%, I believe every 1 or 2 seconds while you're not in combat and while there aren't mobs around you, I believe within 12 yards. And if there are mobs around you within 12 yards, I believe they grant a speed bonus as well as something else. But those are two effects that are really powerful as well for leveling. Unfortunately, well, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but that's probably going to come down to more so personal preference. I suppose if you already have a pair, obviously it's great. They were about 30k on the auction house, I believe, a few days ago. Now on my server, they're 100k. I think people have caught on that they're actually buying these and stockpiling them to sell before a BFA, to actually wear before a BFA. So that's something that you actually really want to keep in mind if you want to weigh your options and see if it's really worth it to you. I mean, the passive movement speed is going to be nice. I just don't know how often it's going to be a thing. You're transitioning from mob to mob, because I know it activates if there's no mobs within 12 yards around you. And when you're leveling and just pulling on things pretty quickly, I guess as Affliction or Destruction, it's going to be really hit or miss. The passive healing is nice once again, but honestly, a lot of the time with Demon or without Destruction, I'm just going to be using my Void Walker if I decide to level as Destruction. And honestly, Affliction will probably start using it at the higher levels as well when I can't one-shot mobs or they're actually taking a little while longer to kill. But regardless, it's something else to keep in mind. And unfortunately, it does take an Azeroth armor slot for us, not necessarily other classes, but it is one thing just to keep in mind when you're moving forward and choosing your correct legendaries for leveling. Now, another thing that I want to touch on before we start leveling in Battle for Azeroth is our actual leveling gear we're going to have. Obviously, we already talked about legendaries for certain specs, things of the sort, but one thing we need to keep in mind as well is that our tier bonuses that we have from Antorus are really not going to be, honestly, very effective when it comes to leveling. As you can see here, honestly, our 2-piece and our 4-piece from Affliction really aren't going to be very useful. They're good on long boss fights and things of the sort where you can extend 3, 4, 5 unstable afflictions, and they keep extending upon themselves, but you're gonna toss an agony and a corruption on a random mob, and it's gonna be dead by the time you turn around. When you're done dying to the figure chasing around as Affliction. The same goes for Destruction and probably even Demonology as well. That they're just not gonna be as powerful because things aren't alive very long. At 110, like I said, I'm basically 980 at this point. Heading in there, I'm basically one-shotting and two-shotting all the mobs. At 110 it's Destruction, and as Affliction, they're chasing me around for 5 seconds and they're dying. My pet's dealing the rest of the damage or whatever, what have you. With that being said, this is a great time to use all those 985 Mythic plus 15 pieces that you've gotten that you can't use because you have your 4-piece on and potentially legendaries or slots too, that you hopefully still have left in the bank. Now, realistically, with my luck, of course, I don't have any 985 pieces of gear. I have a few 980s, but none of them are from Mythic plus. My alts can pull 985s for days. My main can't pull it. They pull base 960. I think I have a 965 ring from Mythic plus. It's my best thing for this whole entire duration of Antorus. But regardless of that, like I said, I actually have a set made here already. As you can see, in this current set I have now, wearing Sephiroth and Sacrolash, I'm 979. The set I made here, though, which is going to be pretty much the set I use for leveling, barring these legendaries. I'm not going to be wearing Helm. I'll be wearing Sephirus and Sacrilege, most likely if I level as Affliction, like I mentioned before. One thing you need to keep in mind, or I guess you can look at here, is that I'm wearing my tier legs because that's my highest item level of tier. But I swapped the 975 pair of tier gloves for 980 gloves, a 960 cloak that was tier for a 965 cloak that I received from Mythic Plus, this is a 965 is again, about as high as I get from Mythic Plus, and a 970 chest that I swapped a 960 tier chest for. Now, obviously, I did lose about 5 item levels here, but if you look as well, I gained almost 200,000 health. I'm at 7.2 million health here, versus swapping back to a double ring build. I'm at 7.07, so I guess about 130,000 or so health, which is a good bit, especially when it comes to leveling. As you can see here, my trinkets do change around a bit. My ring changed a little bit, but it's not really that big of a deal. It's just to fill in spots for legendaries. The main thing I want to touch on here as well is trinkets. Now, probably almost every Warlock, unless you have an insane Titan Forge socket or Arcana Crystal or something very, very odd, like something 985 from a specific dungeon or something going on, we're running Acrid Catalyst and Norgonon's, the Norgon trinket. One thing to keep in mind here, though, is that when it comes to leveling, stat ticks are going to be a whole lot more valuable than, trinkets like Norgon's Prowess that have a lot of passive mastery, but they have a proc on them, and the proc is active for 12 seconds. And unfortunately, that could proc at the very end of a mob being alive. It could proc at the very start as well when you're pulling 10 mobs at once with Affliction, but over the course of time, sometimes it's going to proc at the end, sometimes at the start, and you're going to be running to another pack after the mob dies, and you're going to lose all of its uptime. Which is one of the reasons as to why stat ticks are just so valuable. They're going to provide passive stats, which are going to, passively make your dots or your chaos bolts or your demons hit hard or whatever spec you choose to play, as well as not, like I said, not being proc based. So I'm looking at running Arcana Crystal. Obviously, if you have one, when most everybody's trying to farm them up in Tomb of Sargeras and things of the sort, well, they're coming back. If you still have it, great. If not, there's a few other options. You can obviously try and roll a stat stick from the Relinquished pieces, or try and roll an Arcana Crystal from the Relinquished pieces. I know that there are some stat sticks from World Quest as well, if you're not as geared when it comes to intellect with base mastery crit versatility or haste on them that you can use. But an Arcana Crystal is honestly what you want. It's like the go-to stat stick. It has been for the whole expansion, and it will continue to be a little bit in the battle for Azeroth. The other trinket I'm going to be running is my Acrid Catalyst Injector. I coin it every week. Can't get past the base 960. Is what it is. But once again, it is a proc-based trinket, but it's not at the same time. As if you know anything about Acrid Catalyst, you can see here as well in the text, it grants a haste, mastery, or critical strike. It's more of like a passive granting of them. It's not really it is a proc, but they continue to stack. They stack to 5, and when one of them reaches 5 stacks, all the stacks are consumed, and it grants you 2500 of all 3 stats for 12 seconds. And the thing is, when that expires, it doesn't take very long for the stats to passively begin rolling again and again. So it's sort of a stat stick in itself, and when it procs, obviously the proc is very powerful. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And really, like I said, obviously if you don't have higher pieces, in your tier is your highest piece, that's perfectly fine. You might not be using your tier bonus very much, but it will get some use on rares and things of the sort. But for the most part, you're sort of just going to want to avoid your tier bonuses if you can for higher item level pieces or pieces that grant you a little bit better stats or higher, I guess, health in general. One other thing to keep in mind as well when it comes to gearing is that a lot of people have forgotten about this. We've mentioned how strong passive movement speed is when it comes to Sephiroth's Secret. My plan of using it across all 3 specs. If you look towards your Warlords of Draenor Enchanting, if you look at cloaks, the 4 cloak enchants grant 2% movement speed. Now, once again, this is not okay. It's 10% on Sephiroth's versus 2% on your cloak. It might not seem like a whole lot, but realistically, every little bit helps. And I've tried to push for server first Warlock every single expansion. I missed it in, I believe, Cataclysm by like an hour and a half. And even though it doesn't grant you anything anymore, it's sort of like a personal kind of achievement, even though you don't run for something that's gone. I always find it exciting to rush to, 120. It's just me. I'll enjoy leveling on the beta, and then I'll rush to 120 once I actually get to live servers. But with that being said, 2% movement speed is valuable. And obviously it grants you, mastery, haste, crit, or versatility, depending on what you want. And honestly, your cloak enchant we're using now is 200 intellect, which is not really, it's not a huge loss there. I mean, it's not going to make or break anything. The passive 2% movement speed is going to be more valuable than having 200 intellect versus 2% movement speed and 100 of a stat. So that's something else to keep in mind when you're heading into battle for Azeroth leveling. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. Now, this video did run a little bit longer than I had initially planned, but I really wanted to get all the information that I gathered from Battle for Azeroth leveling to you guys before you guys started making your own Battle for Azeroth leveling plan, so hopefully you guys can put that to good use. I also wanted to mention that there's just under a week and a half or so left in my free 30 days of WoW Game Time giveaway, so if you're interested in entering that, I have a link to that in the description below as well. Once again, guys, if you want to see more WoW and BFA content, remember to smash those like, share, and subscribe buttons, and I'll see y'all pretty soon in Battle for Azeroth. Peace.